if you wake up and you're feeling like you're looking forward to the day, or you're feeling gratitude or some type of positive emotion, that slows your biological aging. And so, even if you're a caregiver, if you adopt a practice of gratitude, or you do something at night to increase your positive affect, we think that that's what matters, that that's what we control. We control what we do in a day, and we don't control the rest, what life situations, our financial, you know, the families we're born into, how much we make. We might love being an artist. We'll never be rich. There's all these things that we need to accept about our lives, but we don't need to accept a state of chronic stress. We need to embrace the idea that actually we can view things. We can have these paradigm shifts. We can view things differently. We can get in touch with what's in front of us that's right, that's good, that is miracles that we wouldn't even see if we're feeling stressed and unsafe.
That was Dr. Elissa Epel. Now, if you're like me, you've heard throughout all culture how stress is bad. And of course, there is a lot of stress in the world that's bad and bad for you, creates bad outcomes, but there's also good stress. And if you want to know how to tell the difference, how to minimize one and cultivate the other, this episode is for you. Yours truly and Dr. Elissa Epel. Dr. Elissa, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Chase. Thanks for including me.
I will confess the first place I saw your work was a TED Talk. And that's not usually where I discover folks, but I was searching for something around stress and relieving stress for in part myself. And I was talking to another friend of mine and came across your work and noticed that you have a new book out, which we will talk about. But for those who aren't familiar with you or your work, I'm hoping you can give us just a little orientation in time, space, uh, geography, who you are, what you like to work on, and why stress has been your focus.
I like to say I'm a stress scientist and a stressed scientist. It is so natural to me to be, they say psychologists study their own issues. I've always been deeply fascinated with the mind body connection. And so that has brought me into a 25-year love affair with understanding it through different types of research, interventions, meditation studies, stressing people out in the lab. We do anything we can to both stress people out and relax people and understand how do these different mind states get under the skin? How do they affect health and aging?
Mm.
So it's been a journey from studying stress and trauma and adversity, and the how how that can be pro-aging and damaging, but then also how those states that we inevitably have an experience and will continue to also lead to deep states of living, of joy, of intimacy, of actually really appreciating life in a way we wouldn't have if we hadn't been so tormented by different things that happen to our life that we have no control over.
Amazing. And well, as you know, the community that you're speaking to today, myself included, we identify as creators, as entrepreneurs, as um, folks who are either identify as such or are curious about that. And it should be no secret. I mean, there's all kinds of myths surrounding artists, right? That we're starving, and this. I think that's a toxic myth, as is that we're disproportionately um, malaligned culturally, or we've got all these problems, and that's why we might be sort of creative. And one of the ways that I wanted to get into your material, and again, we'll talk about your new book. Congratulations. It's called The Stress Prescription: 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. But one of the ways I wanted to get into that material is to hear you talk about how specifically stress can limit creativity for those who are listening. And one of the ways that or some of the ways rather that we ought to think about being better at managing it because we don't want to limit our creativity.
Oh, that is such a good question because even sitting wherever we are right now, whatever our surroundings are impacting how we think and the content of our thoughts. And I have never been so clear on that in um, up until this point in life when we've had the pandemic and the kind of dramatic changes in our environment, how strong that effect is. And I'll just talk personally. I used to talk about moving out of the city and needing to justify why I wanted to live in a greener area. And now it's like, oh my goodness, I have a whole chapter on the effect of green mind, of nature, and how that shapes our mind body experience. My personal experience is that when I get stuck in this daily routine and schedule and really tied to the clock, I am so uncreative. I just do the minimum, to fill the task, get by, and it's not very satisfying. It's certainly high on the maybe it got things done, check, 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 but just really experiencing fully how a relationship, how a connection, how a conversation could go. That's different if I'm in my office and I'm in a rush and I'm trying to kind of do a transaction with someone instead of like be with them and
Mhm.
share the present moment and the sharing of values and whatever we're both thinking is important at that time. That is like a timeless experience. That's more like Kairos time, that type of connection you can have with someone. And that's so precious. And I just squeeze that out of the day, like, with my
Yeah, but this is what
schedule.
we're all chasing, right? With creativity to be able to be, you are aware and talked about flow states and how you can be present in this moment and time starts to work. Um, I would say work for you, but it almost fades into the background. And you talked about there's this presence. Um, what in your studies are some ways that we ought to think about managing or how we ought to think about managing our own stress such that we can be in that optimal state for
Mm,
doing our best work.
mhm. So one way I think about it is that stress is like a cloud, or it's kinda got a vice on our thinking, and it can be a dominant force throughout the day. And once we have some awareness and metacognition of that, we don't have to be a slave to it. We don't have to have it dampen and limit our creativity and our experiences and shaping our body to be on vigilant mode. Who wants that? We have a lot of that unconsciously. And so part of my point in the book is there are flow states and states of deep rest that we're just missing, and we need to cultivate those and value those, and they don't happen necessarily automatically. Sure, they can happen in a forest, or if you're an artist and you're deeply engaged, but we can help ourselves a lot by setting up conditions for safety, deep rest, ease, spaciousness. All of those qualities are rare and they're
Hmm.
precious.
Well, we talked about, I guess in your work, I read, there's there is a balance, right, between managing stress or down regulating those stressful experiences such that we can be closer to flow states and we can not have that vice as you talked about blocking our creativity so that there's ways to manage that. And yet you've also articulated, we'll talk about some of those in a second, cold showers, prioritizing and whatnot, even body posture. I was just aware when I
Mm.
started recording with you before we hit record, I was like, oh, I gotta I gotta impress Dr. Alyssa with my posture so that she doesn't think that I'm not eliminating stress.
You
But
you have a great posture right now, and I will say that leaning forward is engaged, and it is, it's what we do when we're super attentive, but it's also what we do when we're on the edge of our seat and we're trying to project into the future. So, leaning forward, we just have to ask, can I make sure that I'm not living in the future right now? And maybe that upright posture you have. And then leaning back is actually telling our body a totally different story of let experience come to me right now. I can just be here with ease.
Interesting. This idea I want to get further into cold showers, prioritizing even something as simple as you just shared with us, body posture. But you've also articulated a point that I think is a place I would like to excavate around. There's distress, right? There's negative stressors, and there's also this eustress. There's a positive sense of stress that we can leverage, and how to things that are preparing us for what we need to do in the moment. How do we know the difference between what kind of stress we're experiencing, or is that a mind state that we ought to be thinking about controlling?
Mm. It's more mind state. It's more under our control than we think. Of course, there are catastrophic and traumatic situations that we're all going to view that way. But in general, our beliefs are really shaping our biology, our stress response, and how much we're able to think in a clear headed, problem solving way versus a threatened, restricted way during stress. And so, one way to think of po threat of kind of good stress, bad stress is simply, can I approach this situation by looking at what I can learn, gain, grow from it? What is positive that I could get out of this? And then your resources. You got to feel like you're going in with some hope of success. I have support. I can ask for help in this way. I've done this before. I'll always survive. All these statements that we can say to ourselves that are just promoting the stance of, I got this. That actually changes our stress response into one of positive activation. And what I mean by challenge response is we literally pump more blood more efficiently to the brain. We're oxygenating the brain when we're in this positive challenge state of doing something stressful where we feel that we have some control. And so that's great. Now, the opposite is simply when we have that automatic threat response. And believe me, some of us are going to have that really strongly. Don't beat yourself up for it. But it's, what do you do next? How can you turn that from, oh crap, I'm going to be embarrassed, humiliated, I'm going to fail, all those thoughts that just drive that cortisol threat response, to, it's okay, I'm going to survive this. This won't affect me in a year from now. All these thoughts that we can do to kind of reframe the situation and even distancing ourselves from it in certain ways, like watching it like a movie that takes that threat out of it, that adrenal gland response out of the current moment. So there's a lot of hacks, thinking hacks we can do to tone down the excessive threat response. And one thing I love, that I was teaching a CEO about threat versus challenge, and she was she basically ended up with one statement that helped her, which is, my body right now is excited. This is good stress. It's helping me. And it's true that that kind of heart racing and adrenaline response is what you frame it. You can frame that as, oh crap, this is a terrible situation, or I'm excited and I've got all this glucose and energy that's going to help me thrive right now.
Mm. I'm fascinated with, as you are, with the mind body relationship, and actually that this multi-million year old organ between our ears isn't there to necessarily keep us healthy, but help us survive. And it's the act of learning
Hmm.
learning to drive this organ between our ears and get it to work for us. How powerful that is.
And Chase, I would love to hear from you. What are the, if you can generalize a bit,
Sure.
the artist, entrepreneur, creative, common stressful situations or stressors? What does your audience struggle with?
There are a handful of key struggles, uh, and I think stack ranking them is. I'll do just three here, and I'll try and stack rank them on the fly. One is that I'm not enough. My work's not good enough, not original enough. So it's just about enough. I think the second one is probably financial in nature, that there's these toxic myths of the starving artist, for example, and how will I when I've got all this conditioning from my parents and my career counselor and pop culture at large saying, well, I don't know if I can be successful because how many people truly make a living doing the thing that they're passionate about. And what we know now is that millions and millions of people do that, but that is a key concern, the financial one. And then the
Mm,
third one I would say is our ability to help others understand our big dream for this one precious life that we've got. And this is both family members who might be afraid of, points 1 and 2 that I made earlier. How am I going to be in a relationship with this person if they can't, create some success for themselves, or they're living a pipe dream thinking that they can make it as a rock star or as a podcast host or as a playwright. And the ability to communicate with the people that are close to you in order to help them understand that you are all in on this and this was going to really be meaningful for your life. I think those three things are, I think, the most common things that surface whenever I ask the audience questions about this stuff.
mm, that's super helpful. Well, let's start with I'm not enough. What people don't realize is that so many other people have that thought in their head walking around. So we feel alone, we feel some shame, some inadequacy, and the I am not enough turns out to be almost a universal experience. And that's why self-compassion is like this huge trend. People in the US in this Western culture where we're getting so many messages of I'm not enough. I need material wealth. I need these things for society to see that I have value. So of course we have I'm not enough. And how tormenting that thought is. I actually have part of my book on I'm not enough. I met someone named Kathy Kaplaner from Southern California. She was at one of my retreats and she suffers from depression. And she actually got so much solace from the statement of realizing how you could pop that balloon and replace it with I am enough. And she started a national billboard campaign that says, You are enough. She gets letters from people that say, I was actually close to suicide, and I saw that billboard, and I looked into your campaign purpose campaign, and it has saved people. And that's remarkable that we can actually be so tormented by false thoughts like that.
Mm.
And of course, we have this culture that's telling artists, I mean, your only value, is if you make it this level and your fame, where these creatives, if they can't express their creativity and make that a core in their life, they're going to be depressed. You have to follow your gifts that you were given, and what other people think is none of our business. And it's so important for creatives and people with a dream to remember that, because the world will never see them fully. It'll always be a struggle conveying their purpose, their passion, why they need to do this.
So that kind of puts us in that, that first one about, living your dream or the financial or any of those problems that our community, I think, that dominate I'd say the mind share or the rhetoric around the career choices that we make. Obviously, managing our stressors is helpful. So I'd love to shift the conversation, if we can, to some of these very specific things. I will also confess I'm a huge cold water fan. I have a cold water plunge, a permanent one at my home here. I've been a cold water advocate for, oh gosh, I'm working on somewhere between 5 and 10 years now, and it's been transformative for me. The Wim Hof method. Got a couple of scientists, another Dr. Mark from the UK, who talked about um, all the benefits. I'm wondering if we can run through a few. I don't want to just lean on cold water because my audience they've heard me rant about how cold water. You've got a couple of other things listed here in the book that take
Mhm.
prioritizing the inventory of stuff that we've got to do, um, and other ways to like managing time, for example, body scan on some sort of a regular interval. So I'm wondering if you can talk us through those and any others
Yes.
that come to mind specifically ways that we can manage stress?
So I think about it in three ways that we're changing our relationship with stress. So with our mind, we have all this enormous opportunity to reshape stress from threat to be small. And these are some of the mind techniques of it's really a paradigm shift of number one, realizing how much uncertainty stress is with us all the time. And once we can actually do this mindful check in and realize how much we're holding, we're just tense and vigilant, even when we think we're relaxed, we can actually find ease and let go of our uncertainty about the future, our uncertainty stress. It's just with us, especially now. We cannot know the future, we cannot predict it, yet we want to control it. And so by tuning into that and doing these mini meditations to catch and release uncertainty stress, it's a very focused meditation that I think is could take even 2 minutes and can remind us that we can actually feel ease and spaciousness right now while nothing is happening, and notice we're not really relaxed. We actually have unconscious stress that we're carrying, but we can actually tune into our body and name these feelings and emotions. And that, it's name them to tame them. It really does change our experience to feel the ease of safety, the ease of everything is okay right now. It's okay to relax. And we need that. We need those reminders, and I call them safety signals as well. We need safety signals. So shaping, uh, recognizing uncertainty, stress, recognizing that we often are trying to control things we have no control over. That takes up a lot of mental real estate. Those are big mental shifts that we can tap into, and that can, I'll say, reshape stress and shrink it. We can dissolve stress by being surrounded by safety signals. So nature, when we go into nature, we leave the kind of urban environment that is really impinging on our creativity, our spaciousness, and it creates cognitive load. We only have a certain memory bank, right? And it fills it because we're overloaded with stimuli. Nature, we are evolved to see those vast horizons, to see the green shapes, to have those natural odors and fragrances, and we relax in nature. And our mind goes from being filled with rumination, with self referential thoughts, worries, I'm not enough, to all of a sudden, very, very small me interconnected to large world. And that shift can happen very quickly in nature, especially if we open up our sensory gates. So you can do this at home. You can create these safe spaces. And of course, people do that with spiritual rituals. They have a lot of cues in the environment. They might have, a prayer picture or Buddha, etc. That actually conditions us to be letting go of all of that unconscious vigilance. And then the third way is metabolizing stress. And this is what you use a lot, and this is one of my favorite techniques. We can so the nervous system's in the body, and rather than working so hard to control stress mentally, we can actually use the rest of our body in a really powerful way to change our mind. The body changes the mind. When we create short shots of stress that we're controlling and we recover from them, we are metabolizing stress, both emotional stress, physiological stress, all the stress hormones, and we're left with a state of ease, sometimes elation. So that's probably why you've become a regular or maybe even addicted to some of this cold stress. I mean, wow. I have to say it takes a certain personality to do the cold. And my sister-in-law, who is an artist, has become uh, gone from, well, I'll just say it's helped both her art and her health. And just, that kind of toughening up the stress response through the body makes you more emotionally resilient too. We know that when you become fit, you actually respond to a slab in the stressor as if you're a young, healthy, fit person. You recover much more quickly and you have less rumination. So it goes both ways. We got to use our body and not just rely on our mind to be managing all the the vast threats we deal with.
I think that is a massive insight from this, that I think most people believe they can manage this stuff from the couch or the desk or the boardroom or wherever they are. And this idea of getting into the body, and that the body is actually obviously it's interconnected, but that it actually moving the body or affecting it via cold or other stressors, that actually is, in a sense, would you categorize this like a muscle that we're developing? Is this a skill?
Exactly. It is a muscle and it is stress fitness that we're developing, and no one's ever heard of that word. We know aerobic fitness well, and high intensity interval training or aerobic activity, yes, that builds aerobic fitness and it fits the bill for what we're talking about of also building stress fitness. But there's all these other ways that we can stimulate the nervous system without even cardiovascular fitness, and we get stress fitness. And so the cold is a perfect example. And then the heat, the hyperthermia and the sauna, that's turning out to be great for not just cardiovascular health, but for mental health, for stress and depression. And so there's a common what we call hormetic stress response. There's a primitive biological response that we mount with fierce um, intensity when our body feels threatened, and the recovery from that is gorgeous. We've induced this whole restorative response. Our cells are cleaning out. We've released growth factors in the brain, and that is the benefit. That's the recovery and restoration that we get from these short little shots of coffee that are stress fitness. So hot, cold, extreme breathing, of course, aerobic exercise. There's not that many things on this list, but we hope to grow it. Like, what else can help us? Like, we do all sorts of weird things to cells and animals in these studies of hormetic stress, and it makes them live longer. And what can we do in our lives that can be this kind of short-term manageable stress? Most people don't like cold. How did you get used to it, and how does it make you feel? And I especially want to know, Chase, psychologically, what have you noticed? Like, do you relax into it? What are you doing that makes it feel good?
No, I'm happy to talk a little bit about this. So, um, it started for me with cold showers, and I'll confess, like, if I'm sitting by the pool in the sun relaxing and someone plays a joke on me, like throws cold water on me, that is basically like the worst thing you could do to me. And this is in a previous life. I'm just like, why are you shocking me like that? That's a horrible joke to play. So that sets you up for how much I disliked cold water, especially the contrast between being warm and cozy and someone like ruining that.
Sounds
So
horrible.
yeah, so it started out as cold showers, but when I first learned a little bit about this, and I would take a normal shower and then I would flip it to cold for the last minute. And at first, absolutely miserable. I mean, this is like, I am so cozy. I'm all warm. I'm just about to get out, get dressed, get my day going. And then, this blast of cold water. But I noticed one thing that sort of salvaged this for me and made me want to do it again. And that was the feeling of instant euphoria.
Mm.
And this euphoria lasted, I was aware, for a considerable amount of time into the day until I sort of forgot about it or moved on and with my day. But it was like if you could snap your fingers and have an entire cup of coffee flowing through your body immediately.
I love it. Yep.
Yeah, and there
That's
was a
good.
positive, it was very positive.
Yeah.
So this showering went sporadically for a while, and then a lot of people do the polar plunge on New Year's, and we have a house up on at a beach not too far away, and um, it's on a body of salt water that's very cold. It's in the high 40s, and I remember the same thing, getting out of the water after the polar plunge and feeling incredible, and having that feeling last a long time. So I then doubled down on the showers. Showers turned into the occasional, I would go to places that had cold tubs. It was in my past, I was an athlete, and cold water was, if you were injured, you had to put your body in cold water. So I had a negative association with that.
Mhm.
This over time, I had flipped that script to the point that, again, then I built a cold plunge at my house, and now I do it every day. And if I don't have it, I feel sluggish and lethargic, and um, it has helped me realize, and there's no one time that I'm like, I can't wait, because I usually it's a contrast bath. I'm in hot water first, and then I get in cold water. I got a hot pool right next to a cold
Yeah,
pool.
nice.
Never do I'm like, I can't wait to get in that free. I've occasionally had to break ice to get into this thing. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
god.
never do I want to get in there. And yet every time I know that when I'm in there and on the, as I get out, I'm going to feel great. So those
Mhm.
those feelings end up trumping the negative emotions. And I can't actually think I can't think of a life without it now. It sounds difficult to not have had that low weight stressor. Now when I'm in there, I'm immediately able to control my breath, whether the water's, 50 degrees or, 35 degrees.
Well, now that's super interesting because that's actually I was listening for that. What's happening to your breath?
Yep.
Because the untrained response is it's a stress response.
Yeah.
It's both, okay, this is what my body does when it's shocked and cold. And then on top of that, this sucks. This is uncomfortable. This can't be right. So there's all the psychological stress on top of that.
Yeah.
And so the training is about actually attuning. There is no second arrow, meaning there is
Yeah.
no stress about stress in the
Yeah.
trained body like that. And it's just beautiful that you notice your breathing has become continued to be smooth. That is,
Yeah.
I
I'm
think,
also
yeah,
one last point there.
yeah,
So yeah, and I sorry for interrupting
no,
you,
no,
Dr.
yeah,
Listen, but when I'm an advocate for this, so I've always got friends over at my house and they're kind of intrigued and they're like, okay, I'm going to do this cold plunge thing with you. And they get in the hot tub and like, oh, it's really nice. It's 105 degrees in here. I don't really want to do that. And they get in there. And the first thing I observe is instantly their breath is sucked out of them. And if I can just say, cool, focus on one thing and one thing only, and that is your breathing. How can you take as slow and as deep a breaths as possible? And
beautiful.
within a matter of seconds, I observe, and I've observed this, I can say, I think probably hundreds of times from guests that come over to have this experience. There is the I would perceive the stress response goes from a 9 when they first get in there to a 4 in 10 seconds or less.
Mm,
And then
mhm.
I also observe that sort of when they get out, there's a sense of accomplishment. It's sort of like making your bed in the morning. You've heard that about a lot of entrepreneurs, like, I get something done. When you get out of that cold water, you're literally buzzing. Like there's some endorphins that have been released, especially
Yep.
early on in the process. And nobody has said, I don't ever need to do that again. They're like, at least that's interesting.
Yeah. That's very interesting. So we studied the Wim Hof method. Wim Hof came to our labs and he, trained our people. And I believe, and we haven't published it yet, so nothing's ever fact till it's peer reviewed. But when we compare it to other things like plain old hit or relaxation, the people who did the Wim Hof method every day for 3 weeks experience more positive emotions and joy on our daily diary
Wow.
significantly than the other things. So I think that there is really like the euphoria you're describing is really unique to these kind of hormetic stressors. Yeah, it's fascinating. So slowing breathing is super important and valuable. So having that deep rest states and controlling our nervous system through slow breathing, 6 breaths per minute, that alone is great. But to actually do that when your body is under stress is the pairing of I am safe, I can feel comfort in the midst of a physical stress response. And I believe that that's a unique type of resilience that you're training,
Mm.
is I can feel okay, I can relax into discomfort.
Well, one of the things that struck me about your work, it queued up for me another guest we've had on the show a couple times. Um, it, she's written a book called The Artist Way. Her name is Julia Cameron. This has sold millions and millions of copies. She came out in the I think 70s or 80s, um, and she has since written a couple of follow up works. And I had her on the show recently, and she said I received a criticism from the New York Times about the tools that I suggest for creators and entrepreneurs, that the tools are simple and repetitive. And she said, I found that to be the greatest compliment.
Yes.
And when this is, I want to communicate this to our listeners, like that, Dr. Alyssa has identified just a handful of things like cold water, breathing, orienting our priorities, some things as simple as body posture, and that these things are muscles that you train, and you train these over time, and that just simply breathing differently, for example, can change your biochemistry, can change your blood pressure. That's almost, I think it's like the fastest known way to do that. It's faster than injecting drugs into you. Like that, these tools are so available, so universal, and so simple that you can just repeat them on a regular basis. And this is why what I'm getting to here is I don't know I don't know why someone would not adopt these into their daily life. And I would like to hear from you on, you've packaged this in a book that is 7 days, right? The stress prescription, 7 days to more joy and ease. So is 7 days really all it takes?
Well, if you really don't have that much going on that week, I think you could really do it in 7 days, but I really encourage people to try, one thing for days or a week and then a next thing. And there are a handful of strategies, and you just need to find one that fits like a glove and make it a habit. And I couldn't agree with you more. Simple repetition is ritual, and ritual is the foundation of relaxation. And so when we have these daily habits, they are changing our brain pathways, our even possibly our epigenetics. So we're really changing biology, the embedded biology, if we're able to make things a habit. And of course, trying them just once when you can is going to change your day. So it's really not like you have to I just think people should experiment. Try this and see if it works on you. I had one person ask me like, if you're saying that this metabolizing stress response can be hot or cold, like why would I choose cold? I really just want the sauna. And I love that. And yes, just if that's what it's going to take for you, do the sauna regularly. And that has been shown to have so many mental and health benefits. But if you can do both, like you're saying, the hot and cold back to back, then we're really whipping up the stress fitness, the nervous system into shape because we're really challenging it to the extremes back to back. And our body loves that.
Mm. Again, I gotta give a personal plug for the book here, The Stress Prescription: 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. But I would be remiss to let you go before answering or asking you another question. And it is, you have written other books, and specifically a New York Times bestseller around living younger, healthier, and longer. So and it's called the telomere effect. Is that right? The telomere
That's
effect, a
right. Yep.
revolutionary approach to living younger, healthier, and longer. I'm hoping that you can, and this is certainly a tease for more of your work, because I started going down prior to any guest going on the show, I would go deep down the rabbit hole. And the I'm wondering, did your studies around aging, metabolism, and emotion, where you're the director at UCSF of those things, but was it your focus on aging and emotion, for example, that led you to stress, or was it your focus on stress that helped you understand the relationship between stress and aging and our emotional regulation?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I entered it really fascinated with the dark side, with how does stress and trauma get under the skin and affect aging. And then once we look at, well, how do we measure aging? Oh, it turns out that there are some great ways that we can take blood, look into a cell, and get a proxy of our rate of biological aging. And so that's how I got onto telomeres. And I was just so lucky that my colleague and Nobel laureate Liz Blackburn was at UCSF. So she was on the same campus, knocked at her door, said, "Wow, there's this thing called chronic stress and allostatic load that screws up our regulatory systems and can cause high blood pressure. I wonder if it changes rate of aging." And she was like, "Well, gosh, there's a lot we don't know about it already on the genetics side." But I'm convinced by data. Let's see. So I gave her, I looked at caregivers, I gave her blood, her lab blood, and Julin, my other colleague, we measured a bunch of things in the cell. And even in our first study, which was, over 15 years ago, we found that chronic stress was accelerating the biological aging, shorter telomeres, lower levels of the anti-aging enzyme telomerase, higher oxidative stress. But since then, we've done so many studies showing that, oh, wow, it doesn't, yes, if you have this uncontrollable defining stressor in your life, there's more wear and tear in general on average, but really it's about what you do every day. And if you wake up and you're feeling like you're looking forward to the day, or you're feeling gratitude, or some type of positive emotion, that slows your biological aging. And so, even if you're a caregiver, if you adopt a practice of gratitude, or you do something at night to increase your positive affect, we think that that's what matters, that that's what we control. We control what we do in a day, and we don't control the rest, what life situations, our financial, you know, the families we're born into, how much we make. We might love being an artist. We'll never be rich. There's all these things that we need to accept about our lives, but we don't need to accept a state of chronic stress. We need to embrace the idea that actually we can view things, we can have these paradigm shifts, we can view things differently, we can get in touch with what's in front of us that's right, that's good, that is miracles that we wouldn't even see if we're feeling stressed and unsafe. And so that's why I wrote this book, was the people really resonated to understanding, okay, so my aging can be affected by stress. Now that I know my cells are listening and my telomeres are sensitive, I'm going to go to the gym more. So they get a little burst of motivation from the mechanistic understanding that our cells care what we're feeling. But then there's all these, um, as you said, small rituals that we can add, just add a few, and they really can help. And that's what I hope people will learn from this, is that there's not some high-tech thing you need to buy. You don't need to change your life dramatically. You need to find what, as I said, you can shape stress differently. You can help it evaporate by having some green rituals with nature, or you can metabolize it. You don't have to do all of them.
Hmm. I think we just found the cold open for the show. That was so well put. And thank you for connecting this sort of aging, stress, emotional response. I have been fascinated by that for decades, and your work. Congratulations
Thank you.
on the success, and of course, on the new book. This community we are voracious readers, and we do everything we can to support authors in their pub week. I have highly recommend the book. And I want to say thank you for writing it.
Thank you so much. That's so nice. I really appreciate your appreciation. It means a lot coming from you. I have to say, I'm super excited to, publish our results on this.
I can't
So
wait. Vim has been on the show, and I'm sure he's excited about the results too. I'm an advocate for him. And now for you, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there a place besides your two, most recent books that I have already talked about in the show? Is there anywhere you'd like to steer our community to support you and your work, or to learn more?
I finally launched a website this week. So needed one, to, really show. I have a lab website that has all our research and studies, and you can join studies. So, but now I have a personal website that has retreats and talks that are more about contemplative science, meditation, stress, that are more for the general public. So I'll give you both sites. The lab website is amecenter.ucsf.edu, and AME Center is Aging, Metabolism, Emotions. And so that's our research site. And then the book retreat events site is just simply my name, elissaepel.com.
Great. I
So
am so grateful for your time today. Thank you again for being a guest. Keep doing the good work, and we would love to have you on the show anytime when you make new discoveries, or where this update comes out on the cold water effect and the positive effects of it. Would love to have you back. Until then, thank you so much, and for myself and for everyone out in the community, grateful for you. And we bid you all listeners out there in the world adieu for the day.
thank you so much, Chase. It was a pleasure.